Hello, once again, I'm Mr. York, and today I am so excited to be joined by Dr. Nathan Ho. First, I just want to say welcome and thank you so much for joining us. If you'd like to introduce yourself and your occupation, that'll start things off for us, and then I'll get started with the questions.
I really appreciate you having me, and it's a good opportunity. I'm a interventional cardiologist. I work out of Carson Tahoe Cardiology. That's in Carson City. I've been here for almost 10 years. When you hear somebody having a heart attack, that's kind of what I do. I fix them.
So we're going to start at the beginning. We went to middle school together. In fact, we went to elementary school together. So we've known each other for quite a while. But you went to West Covina High School and you graduated number one, right? Valedictorian, 1992. Did you like high school?
Yeah, I mean, I thought I liked West Covina High School and really enjoyed our experiences there. And I think it prepared us adequately.
Where did you go right after high school?
Well, I stayed local. And so I got scholarships to go to UCLA. And so I just stayed at UCLA. That's where I did my undergrad, Bachelor of Science in Biology.
What can you tell us about UCLA undergrad? Did you love being in LA? Did you have fun?
Yeah, I think that's probably the most fun I had because, things were broad. You're still new at a lot of stuff. But, the campus itself, I mean, it's the idea that you're going to live away from home for the first time. Met a lot of good friends, classes, auditoriums of 350 kids, and they're all bright kids and they're all doing really good. And then, going through the litany of tests and cramming for tests, and that it's really a unique experience. But then, there's athletics too, and things to do. And so there's lots of, ways to vent, and it was interesting and it was fun.
So you had a good time at UCLA, and then you have to take the MCAT. Is that right?
Yeah. And so you kind of prepare for that in your kind of sophomore, junior year. Although at that time, there was not a lot of preparatory classes. Now it's just standard. Everybody's doing it. So I hear, but at that time, it was kind of new. And so we sign up for that test and you took it and submit that in addition to your applications. And then they either like you or they don't.
Where did you apply to med school?
I stayed generally in the West Coast. And so I didn't apply to anything in the East Coast just because of my parents and my wife's parents are near here. And so we didn't go very far. But, I stayed local and I did fine.
Where did you end up getting accepted and going to med school?
Yeah, so I went to Midwestern University. That's in Glendale, Arizona. And my wife ended up applying to Midwestern University for the PharmD program there. And so we just both went to graduate schools there. So
that worked out really well. You guys were able to go to grad school together. What does your wife do again?
She's a pharmacist.
So while you're going to med school, she's going to pharmacy school. And did you guys both end at the same time or around the same time? How did that work out?
Yeah, around the same time. She actually went a year later than me. So she ended up going to Cal Poly Pomona and got her biology degree there. And so we ended up graduating roughly around the same time. And after medical school, I ended up going to residency in Long Beach. So I went into general internal medicine with the idea that, I'm going to be a primary care physician because I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do in the health field. And so I chose that just because there are opportunities that you can divert yourself to and just in case you want to do something a little more focused.
When we were younger, you always told me that what you wanted to do was to be a bilingual doctor and use your talent for language. How has that worked out? And do you see a lot of patients because of that?
Yeah, it's funny you say that, Scott, because I do remember that. And I thought that would be an advantage or an additional tool that I think would help others. In Long Beach, I did use that and that was helpful. But here in Carson City, I can count on the one hand how many patients that are Vietnamese. And so, that's rare. And then the other thing is when I did my fellowship for cardiology and interventional and general cardiology, I was in Oklahoma. And so you can imagine how many Vietnamese Americans there are in Oklahoma. That's the one thing that I probably could have used more, but it just didn't have work out that way.
You
Okay.
talked about med school, and so you're in Arizona in med school. What do you called your first year of med school?
Medical school, your first 2 years is just the didactic years. So it's more of the books and classes and basic sciences and anatomy, physiology. And so those are kind of the 2 years that are more textbook and cadavers and working on body parts and learning organ systems and how they work. Yeah,
So
more of
that's
the
your
sciences,
first year, right? Or that's your first 2 years.
first 2 years.
What do you call your third year?
Well, your third year and your fourth year are more your clinical years, meaning that you spend blocks, months at a time in different categories, shadowing and getting clinical experience, basically, and kind of learning the basics of physical examinations, and all the while learning a breadth in different fields and seeing what you like. I mean, we have OB-GYN, rotations, pediatric rotations, neurology rotations, emergency room rotations, surgical rotations. So the school sets up these clinical opportunities for you, and you get an evaluation, and it goes into your file. I think that your third and fourth year are the more applicable in terms of what you've learned and what you've set out to do. I mean, you see the short white coats; those are the medical students that they wear, and that's medical school, and so that's 4 years.
Okay, so you get done with 4 years of medical school.
Mhm.
What'd you do after that?
Yeah, so after medical school, you go, you can apply and match for residencies depending on what field of medicine you want to go to, and so you can match in your fourth year. Match meaning that you send applications and you go interview for those spots, and then if they like you and you like them, you rank them and they rank you, and so in the end, there's a matching day, and you find out where you go, or where your assignment ends up being. Some people go in military and they match through the military. Some people have, husband and wives, and they match, couples match. But for the most part, you kind of list what your top priorities or programs that you like, and the programs pick you, and they link the two together, and you end up going wherever you get hooked up with.
Is that the point where you pretty much feel like you're starting your job? And do you
Yeah.
start on a contract to actually be paid at that point?
Yes. So you start your residency, and you do get paid for residency. At the time when I was at Long Beach, they paid $27,000. So I think I did the math one time, and I think it works out to be like $3.50 an hour or something like that. So your first year, they call that your intern year. And that just means you spend a lot of time in the hospital, and it's the hardest year in terms of hour dedication and commitment to the program. Sort of your toss into the fire, spend a lot of time doing scut work, so to speak, and getting your first round of exposure to clinical medicine, and running around doing crazy things, and things that you read about, and now you're applying it. Under the umbrella of somebody supervising you, but still you're doing a lot of the stuff yourself.
So your first year out of med school, you're an intern and you
Mhm.
actually start getting paid. And then you do that for 1 year. You did that at Long Beach.
Right.
And then where
Um,
did you go after that?
well, it's still in the same program, and so my program's 3 years, but the first year they call it the intern year.
And then the next two.
Yeah, the next 2 years you're still a resident, and so you're second year resident and a third year resident. So third year resident, you're kind of the senior resident, so you're the top dog in the training pool. How it works is they usually pair you, and so you have a higher level resident working with a newer resident. So, for example, if you're an intern, or you're on call with a senior resident, and typically what he'll tell you is, he'll say, or he or she will tell you, you're on call. Here's the pager. Don't call me. And calling me is a sign of weakness, they'll say. So you take all the calls from the nurses, the docs, the ER, the admits, and then you call the senior resident when you have any questions. And so that's typically how it works. And then once you get into the second resident year and the third resident year, you kind of impart your knowledge and wisdom to your first years. And then, of course, your senior residents work under the attending, which is the licensed physician. The intern year is particularly tough. You're in charge with academics and presenting cases and getting drilled with questions. And so that's why it's not just laborious work. It's about getting grilled by your attendings and your colleagues, and it's intense.
Basically, what you're talking about is 8 years of school, 3 years of training where you're getting paid, not so much, but you are getting paid at least. And
Mhm.
so, I mean, I think that's the toughest thing, is that you have to kind of get through that much schooling and somehow survive financially. So
Right.
that's a feat in itself. You get done with 11 years of basically 8 years of school and 3 years of training that's barely paid. Then what?
Well,
Are you a doctor then?
you are a doctor then, and some people choose to go out and start practicing. And so for me, I could have done that and gone out and be an internist, an internal medicine doctor. But I chose to apply for fellowship. And so cardiology fellowship, I got accepted at Oklahoma State University. And so that's where I ended up going. And that's an additional 3 years for general cardiology.
Being paid during that time too, right?
Right. And so I went from 27,000 my first year to 31 my second year and 33,000 my third year. And then when I was a fellow at Oklahoma State, I ended up earning, I think, 42,000. And then by my third year, that went up to 45,000. So, in terms of fun, collegial, and feeling part of the team, I think probably the most fun I had was at Oklahoma State.
So that sounds
Yeah.
cool. So how long did you stay at Oklahoma State?
So 3 years for general cardiology. When you're there are other didactic residencies and programs. And so as a cardiology fellow, you're also in training too, but you have lower trainees who are still fresh. And so you round with them and they consult you, and you have didactics and meetings and stuff where you present cases. So you do get a sense of collegiality where you work with other trainees, and they look at you like, because you're technically a licensed physician as it is already, but now you're kind of getting your training in a subspecialty. Again, there's hierarchies. Your first year you do a lot of the scut work in cardiology. Your second year you're a little further removed and a little higher up on the food chain, and then your third year you're almost done. So I ended up staying for 3 years there, and then I decided to stay for the interventional training at Oklahoma State because I wanted to do procedures and stenting and angioplasty. And so I stayed on for an additional year there at Oklahoma State. And so I spent 4 years at Oklahoma State.
And then after Oklahoma State, now you're a cardiologist.
Yeah.
And what next?
Of course, along the way, you have to take your boards and so forth. And so after I graduated from Oklahoma State University, I went and interviewed, did all the tour and interviewed in Southern California, mainly Southern California. But I wanted to stay in the local regions where my family, my wife's family is. And, when you get through your 9th, your 10th interview in Southern California, and you look around and you're sitting in traffic and you're waiting, it becomes clear to you that maybe, and by that time, I have two girls. And so we just decided maybe Southern California is not the right time right now. And so I ended up interviewing in Carson City. And I thought, well, this seems like the people that interviewed me really liked me, and I liked them, and it seems like a good fit. And so I ended up, just giving it a try for 2 years and see how that goes. So I signed a 3-year contract, but you're free to leave anytime you want. And and I've been there ever since, and just kept on renewing. So basically, every step of the way you get certified. And so when you ask me, at what point do you become a doctor? And I know of some guys who I trained with along the way that didn't finish their residency. You can get your licensure after the first year of your internship. And so some states require that you can get your licensure and go practice. And some guys like myself actually moonlighted and worked in our second and third year, doing urgent cares, for example, part-time on a Friday, Saturday. So you can do that too. But after your internship year, you can take your next step in your boards and get your license. You can get. I've gotten my California license way back in my second year of residency training. It's just a matter of, if you want to be board certified in a particular field, to take your boards, you have to finish your residency. So that's important. So if you go to somebody and they say, well, he's not board certified, yeah, maybe because he didn't take his boards and he didn't get certified by a certifying body, or he didn't finish his residency. So I'm actually triple board in internal medicine and general cardiology and interventional cardiology. And so every step there's a certifying body that says, yeah, this guy is certified and he's worthy. And then you get a little abbreviation at the end of your name.
So that kind of brings us to our last question, which is, what's next for you then?
I think for me, I'm quite happy with a blend of what I'm doing, which is I do general cardiology 3-4 days a week. I do interventional cardiology. I'm in the hospital doing surgeries, maybe 1 or 2 days a week. And then I get medical students every now and again. And, so all that is kind of fun. And then, I like Carson City in terms of the demographics. And I live in Reno, which is a nice town in which you can do outdoor stuff, and it's close enough where you can go to California over the hill, and Sacramento is like 2 hours away. And so it has a kind of a small town feel to it. A lot of people are figuring it out and they're moving from the Bay Area over to here.
Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Nathan Ho, and we appreciate your expertise in the field of cardiology and talking to us about med school and the medical field.
Well, thank you so much for having me and giving me the opportunity. So, yeah, feel free to reach out to me anytime you need.
We certainly will. In fact, we'll probably do this again next year.
Sounds good, Scott.